The information provided in this presentation and during this webinar should not be construed as legal advice. Attending this webinar does not constitute or create an attorney-client relationship between you and Spilman Thomas Battle, PLLC, or any attorney associated with the firm. Material distributed during this webinar is done so with the understanding that the author, publisher, and distributor are not rendering legal or other professional advice on specific facts or matters and, accordingly, assume no liability whatsoever in connection with its use.
My name is Julian Neiser. I'm a partner with Spilman Thomas Battle, and I'm the chair of the construction group that we have here. I want to talk to everybody about some of the basics that may help residential contractors avoid problems with their customers, maybe increase your profitability and run a better business. So just so everybody knows, I don't do much residential construction work anymore. I have done a lot of it. I represent a lot of residential contractors just to help their businesses along, make sure their contracts are in line. And when they get sued, we'll represent some contractors in some disputes. Most of my practice is focused on large industrial projects, but the same principles on industrial projects are the same for residential construction. The real difference is the cost. So residential construction cases are extremely expensive. They're very invasive, and most of the time they're entirely avoidable. So this seminar is part of my intent to try and help contractors do better business. So perhaps I get fewer calls from homeowners who want to sue their contractors. And maybe you can take some of the lessons learned from the larger construction projects or cases or issues and apply it to your own business, and then maybe you become successful enough to be one of those big players. So I mention that simply because this is not a sales pitch by me. This is me truly wanting to help contractors grow, do good work, and avoid the problems that you have if you're dealing with homeowners. You know, one thing that you should remember is that when you're dealing with a factory, or you're dealing with a power plant or one of those large industrial facilities, the folks who work on those projects, when they're done at the end of the day, they go home. If they have a lawsuit, they go home to a place that isn't involved in the lawsuit. In residential construction, homeowners are living in their lawsuit. They can't separate their personal life from this thing that's out there, this dispute with a contractor. They have to walk by work that they may not be happy with, or that they feel that they may have overpaid for. So what happens is the mindset of a plaintiff in a residential case, it becomes very personal. It's almost like a divorce case or a family case because it's their home. So that's one thing you have to understand when you're doing this work. It isn't just construction. You're also dealing with somebody's house. And you're dealing with their, place of refuge. And also understand that if they get upset, they're going to be upset more and more and more as time goes by. So let's get into the basics here. I'd like to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation. If anybody would like a copy of it, we're happy to provide it. And hopefully everybody can see my screen. So the objectives here, to understand how to maintain corporate formalities to avoid personal liability. And we'll explain this. We want to keep your business separate from your personal life. And if we can't separate your business from your personal life, then what's going to happen is if you get into a dispute and you don't have any money in your company, then your personal assets may be at risk. We're going to talk about Pennsylvania laws related to residential construction. We're going to talk about managing customers, projects, and profits through your contracts, and create a system that serves your business and your customers. Great. So let's first talk about corporate formalities. So one of the first things you have to do for any small business is to incorporate. To create a limited liability company, an S corporation. You could even do a C corporation, but I would recommend against it unless you have a reason for it. Filing an LLC is incorporating. And what that does is it creates a legal separation between you and your company. It's easy to do. The filing fee is about $125. We do these type of incorporations all the time for our clients. They're not difficult to do. Insurance people, this happened just last week with a fairly sophisticated company. They were wondering why they needed to incorporate a new business. They were already incorporated, but they wanted to create a new entity. When they heard from somebody that insurance will cover them, insurance will not cover you from the things that will kill your business. There is no such thing as insurance coverage for breach of contract. If you are a contractor and you damage somebody's home, or your work is deficient, it's likely that your insurance will not cover that under Pennsylvania law. The only way that your insurance coverage would apply is if there's an accident and you damage parts of their home that's unrelated to your work. So insurance, for the most part, means almost nothing to most residential contractors. You have to have it to register, but it may not help you. And I want to explain what alter ego is. In law, we call a claim against the owners of a business as opposed to the business. We're talking about the individuals as opposed to the owners, as piercing the corporate veil. And one of the legal theories is called alter ego. So you get a business owner, he files an LLC, he doesn't separate his business and personal banking accounts. He signs contracts under his own name. He takes money from the company to pay his own personal expenses. And the idea is that the business is just an alter ego of the person. So therefore, there's no separation between them. So that is what we mean if you ever hear the term alter ego. It's not really important for you to understand the legal concept, but understand that it's very important to keep your business and your personal affairs separately. And that means when you incorporate, you get an EIN number, an employer identification number. You take that to the bank with your LLC or corporation filing. You open up a separate bank account in the name of the business, and you do not ever mix personal and business finances. You also need to register to do business in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. There's a form online, I believe it's called the PA 100. And you list your business. This signs you up to pay sales and use tax, and it also gives you a business license. You have to make sure you sign contracts on behalf of a company. If your company is called, ABC Contractors, and at the end of the contract, it should say by signature, and underneath that, ABC Contractors. That means you are signing on behalf of the entity. If you just sign your name, you are signing as an individual. And I'll explain to you why that separation has to occur. But before we get to the business partners and investors, if your business is sued because of a breach of contract or damage or defective workmanship or something like that, if there's limited assets in the business, that's all the person suing you can get to. If they can pierce the veil, they can get into your personal assets, meaning your personal checking account. If you're single and you hold all the assets in your own name, like you own a home or you own a car or equipment, they can take that judgment if they get a judgment against you and execute on those assets and then sell them. So, that's why you need to keep the business and personal matters separately so you don't expose yourself as an individual. When you start a company, be very careful with business partners and investors. I always tell clients who are looking to start a new business with a friend or a spouse or even their brothers or sisters, you need to understand, the one question is, are you willing to sue those people? Would you be willing to sue them if there's a business dispute? And if the answer is no, you should not go into business with them. And that isn't to say, are you willing to be nasty or do bad things to them? It's a question of separating your business and your personal affairs. With investors, people putting money into your business, the problem with that is at some point it becomes an unequal partnership. If the business does poorly, the person who put the money into the business is going to want to know why. because they put the money into the business. If the business does well, then the person who put the money in won't be doing anything at all. They just put money in and they get their shares out of it. And the person who's doing all the work in the fully functioning good business is going to say, why am I doing this with you? You're not doing anything. You gave me 25 grand and that's it. It's worth a lot more. I'm not going to give you your share. So be very careful with investors. Investors tend to be, unless it's a large project that you're going to turn over and sell, can be very dangerous for you. You need to have a detailed operating agreement if you do go into business with somebody else. And that operating agreement explains, how is the business to be conducted? Who is in charge? Can you add new partners or new members to the LLC? If one of the members wants to leave, how do you value that interest and pay them out when they leave the company? If you don't have a good operating agreement, you're going to have a lot of problems. If you want to use LegalZoom or one of those online forms, be very cautious and beware. I've seen more than my share of those things that are cheap up front, but they create a lot of problems later. I have a partner who does very high-end agreements, and I've talked to him about the differences between these forms and like what he does as a custom work product, and I've learned quite a bit about it. There's no way for you to take a form and be comfortable with the fact that you're being protected. The legal fees to do things like this generally aren't that expensive. You can easily find a lawyer to do it. Feel free to reach out to me and I'll give you an idea how much it would cost to do. But you have to have an operating agreement. And at the very least, you need a very simple one to open a bank account, because a lot of banks will require you to have one, even if it's just a business with yourself and an agreement with yourself. It may seem stupid, but these are the requirements under the Patriot Act. Again, separate your business checking accounts and credit account cards. See how I keep mentioning this over and over again? This is where companies get into trouble. I remember a case a few years ago where a contractor he had a contract with a large company. He was performing work for them. It was going well, and then all of a sudden, he ran out of money. So what he was doing was you'll hear me talk about front loading. He was taking money from one job to finish the last job that he was on, so he could never ever catch up. And then he had to file for bankruptcy. And then what we found was that he was paying for Disney trips and cars for his ex-wife and all these other things directly out of his business account, which made him unable to pay his bills when due. That rendered him insolvent. Because he was rendered insolvent, that was a legal excuse for the company to go after his personal assets, and they did. One thing to be aware of, if you are incorporated and you're just looking for some contract tips going forward, which I'm about to get into, is the Corporate Transparency Act. I believe by the end of this year, you need to file a document that lists details about your company with the government, where in the past you did not have to do so. So Google Corporate Transparency Act. The forms are easy to fill out. And again, that's something that any lawyer should be able to help you with. And get an accountant. We all do. We're all good at things. We're also bad at things. I work with accountants all the time. I work on, projects in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I understand accounting. However, I have an accountant. I am not an accountant. I'm no good at it. If you're good at building houses, build houses. If you're not good at building houses, do something else. But I guarantee you, as a small business owner, you can't be all things to all people. Accountants aren't that expensive. They'll take care of your taxes at the end of the year, and they'll give you guidance on how to do things the right way. So let's assume that you get your business up and running and you are out there, you're ready to go. You have some customers, you have the desire to run this business and run. You need to understand that Pennsylvania has some very onerous, which means bad, laws for contractors out there. The law is not set up to favor contractors. The law is set up to favor owners, home buyers, consumers. And one of the laws that was passed in the past 10 years is the Home Improvement Consumer Protection Law. We just call it HICPA because it's hard to say the whole thing because it's so long. HICPA ties into a law called the Unfair Trade Practices and Consumer Protection Law. what we're going to talk about, and the reason why we have to talk about these at the same time, is if you violate the home improvement consumer protection law, then you automatically violate the unfair trade practices law, which allows a plaintiff, a homeowner, to collect treble damages, 3 times the damages that they're seeking, plus attorney fees. We just talked about piercing the corporate veil generally, so I'll move on quickly. This is the ability of somebody to bypass the corporate form, pass up an LLC or a corporation, and go after you individually. You need to understand how to register as a home improvement contractor in Pennsylvania, which is mandatory, and understand just general principles of contract and fraud law. HICMA compliance is vital for you. You need to have a contract that complies with HICMA. But the first thing you need to do is register as a contractor. If you Google HICMA registration Pennsylvania, it'll take you to a page. You need to have insurance. You have to have some ID, and it costs $50, and then you can register as a contractor. Your contracts all should be in writing. One question that clients have all the time is, can I have a verbal contract with somebody? Is a verbal contract enforceable? Yes, it is. With the exception of a few, such as sales of land or interest in land, and a few other things, a contract can be oral. So if I say, hey, I'll do this job for you for $100, and they say, great, here's $100, and then you don't perform, you're in breach of contract, even if it's not in writing. Still, under the HICMA, all contracts have to be in writing, and it has to contain your HICMA registration number. The contract needs to be signed by you, or if you have a salesperson, and the owner or the owners. If it's a husband and wife and they both own the property, you want them both to sign. You want to make sure that they're both obligated for payments under the contract. If they refuse to do it, refuse to do the contract. It's not going to be worth it. But the owners of the property both have to sign the contract. And that contract should contain all appendices. So a lot of times you'll have a simple contract, and then it'll say contractor will perform the work as specified on Schedule A. And then you attach a scope of work. And the scope of work will have, estimates. It'll have the work that you're going to perform with some specificity, and it all has to be attached to that contract. And once you get it signed, scan the thing and email it to the client, email it to yourself, and have a good document management system. You would be surprised how many times you have cases where the client is right, but their documentation is horrible, and as a result, they lose. It happens more often than you possibly can imagine, and no lawyer can do a magic trick to make that go away. The contract should list the date that you sign it. You have to list a start date, and you also have to list a completion date. If it's an estimate, write down an estimate and have the customer's initial next to it. If you don't do that, then it's not in compliance with state law. The contract needs to have your name and address. You cannot use a PO box. You also cannot use a PO box when you try and incorporate. You have to have a physical mailing address. Can you use your home address for the business? Absolutely, you can. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Is it something that could help later whenever you want to demonstrate a separation between yourself and your business? Sure, but let's be realistic here. A lot of home contractors are operating out of their garage. It's one person, it's one vehicle, and one set of tools. You do your best to keep it separate, but you have to be able to live and function. You shouldn't be forced to rent space if you don't need rent space. Until, maybe at some point you're successful or more successful and you can do that, but just no PO boxes. You need to describe the work, the materials to be used, and any specs. You cannot modify the specifications without a change order. We're going to talk about change orders a lot. What I see with residential contractors is they essentially mobilize to somebody's house. They almost embed with their family. And then they develop a relationship. Sometimes the owner will make them coffee and have donuts and all these other things. And then if things go south, then the owner gets mad because they believe that they befriended the contractor, and the contractor is just looking for a break. They're looking for a place to use a bathroom, they're looking for shade, and they're looking for water. Sometimes and being friendly doesn't mean you're friends. So what will happen, and that when the relationship becomes familiar and you become friendly, is that one of the owners will say, Mr. Contractor, Miss Contractor, hey, instead of making these cabinets 20 inches wide, can you make them 22 inches wide? Contractor says, yeah, no problem. It's going to cost you another $100 per cabinet. And they say, yeah, no problem, no worry. Well, 6 months later, something else goes wrong. You give them a bill for the additional 2 inches of material per cabinet, and then next thing you know, they're like, I never agreed to that. And the law says that you have to have a signed change order. You should have a sales price or a T&M clause. There's added requirements for T&M clauses that I won't get into, to include disclosures of potential cost and things like that. But you need to include the total price for the project as you estimate, which means you have to be very careful that that cost is legitimate. You may think, okay, I can do this job for $20,000. It's going to be tight, but I like these people. They're really nice. They have kids and a Labrador, and I love the Labrador. So, hey, I'm going to give them a break. I'm going to give them a break. Because you want to be able to do things like that as a business owner, as opposed to working for a large corporation. Well, if you have a $5,000 overrun, they aren't going to sign a change order. Next thing you know, you're paying $5,000, and that's money that could go into your kid's college fund, or be profit for the year, or a vacation, or buy new equipment. You're subsidizing their job. So you have to make sure that you have enough float in that job where you, under promise and over deliver. And if you come in under your estimate and you tell them, hey, it was supposed to be 25 grand, but I came in at 22, they're going to think you're the greatest person in the world, and they're going to tell everybody who you are. Also, if they're going to balk at another $5,000, you probably don't want the job, because it's always about the money, but it never really should be about the money. It should be about what they want to accomplish and then make sure they can afford it. The contract should specify a down payment, but you cannot get more than 1/3 of the, for a contract above $10,000, I believe, no more than 1/3 of the contract value, plus the cost of special order materials. Special order materials are things that, you can't just go to Home Depot and get, okay? Or they're customized, or they're altered in some way where you couldn't actually return them. So let's say that cabinet example, they wanted not just the your inexpensive rental cabinets that you can buy at Home Depot for at a discounted price, but they want a Cookabola wood, to quote Better Call Saul, and they want to have their initials engraved in the front of it. Well, once you get that specialty material ordered, you can't return it. If they're generic products, I guess you could, but if it's custom made, you cannot generally. So you want the client to pay upfront for that, and do not order them until they pay you for it and the money clears. If you don't, you may get stuck holding the bag. I had a client one time that was left holding $80,000 worth of cabinets that was made by some guy in the middle of the state. Beautiful work, beautiful wood, but the thing is, the client stiffed him, and he was stuck with that, and it was $80,000. The contract also should include all your known contractors. Again, no PO boxes. And they want to know that they should be disclosed. This is where the parts where it almost becomes silly, but it's not. It's part of the law. The contract has to include the toll-free number for the Bureau of Consumer Protection. If not, technically, it's not in compliance with Pennsylvania law. It also should include your insurance information. You get a deck sheet. Call your carrier. Your carrier will email you a deck sheet in 5 minutes. It doesn't cost you a penny. For the insurance information, I just say see attached information sheet and attach it to the contract. That allows them to not only confirm that you have insurance, that it is indeed current, but if they need to make a claim, they can try to do so, or at least put them on notice, even though they're probably not able to do so directly. Some customers may ask you to become an additional or named insured. That's something you have to think about because that basically puts them on the insurance policy. So you need to be very cautious if they want to do things like that. Larger jobs will generally require you to do that. And if you're working larger jobs where that's a requirement, you should consult with a lawyer. The contract has to include a statement of right of rescission, meaning that the customer, not you, the customer can rescind the contract within 72 hours of signing it. Again, this is not set up to be a contractor-friendly law. It is to protect the consumer. And if you don't start work within 45 days of when you were supposed to start, and there's a couple other requirements. If the client emails you and says, hey, I want my money back, you have to give that to them. This is why when you get deposits, it's best for you to take those deposits and put them in a separate bank account. And account for them completely separately from all other work that you're doing. Just don't touch it. Any violation of HICPA is a violation of the trade practices law, which can impose treble damages and attorney fees. I mentioned that earlier. I will tell you, just as a trial practitioner, it's not common for that to happen. I mean, it can, but for the most part, it's generally rare when that actually does happen. But it's in the law. And if you get a plaintiff lawyer who's not that experienced in actually trying cases and bringing these things in front of the actual judges, especially here in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, they'll find that the courts are not inclined to do something like that. Got a thing out of order here, but let's talk about prohibited acts. Prohibited acts are a list of things that as soon as you do it, you have violated the HICPA. Fail to register, failure to refund money within 10 days of a request, if no substantial work has happened or more than 45 days have elapsed since it was supposed to start. False documentation, like a false certificate of completion, abandoning or failure to perform on a contract, with one exception. If they aren't paying you, you need to terminate a client. I will explain that in a bit. Deviating from plans and specs. Here's what I love. Damaging the property so then you can charge the client to fix it. It's like the old, crooked mechanic who, severs a line so they can, while they're repairing it, so they can say, here's your problem, let me fix it for you. But you need to make sure that, when you enter into a contract, you have to start performance and you have to hit the dates and you have to order the materials and do those things. If not, it isn't just violation of this law, it can be fraud. And if it's fraud because you get money from a customer and you don't actually perform and you hold the money, even though it may not be your intention, that may be the result of the thing. And one thing else to know is that if you have a fraud claim against you and you have to file for bankruptcy, that is not dischargeable in bankruptcy. An intentional act is not. Student loans, taxes, criminal restitution, intentional acts, not dischargeable under bankruptcy. So you're stuck with it even if you file. We talked about that rescission within 72 hours. If you violate the HICPA, the client can void the contract. That means they can void it. It's deemed null and void and of no legal effect. So it's basically withdrawn. They can terminate the contract. One thing you can do as a contractor, because I don't want you to think that it's all so, gloomy for you, but you do have rights as a contractor. You have a right to be paid. You have a right to be paid the frequency that's in the contract. But if you don't get paid, you can file a mechanics lien on a property. And this is why you need both owners to sign. If you're a subcontractor and the owner has paid the general, you cannot file a lien on the project. You're done. You can't do anything about it. There's an exception of the Pennsylvania lien law. In commercial projects, an owner may have to pay twice. In residential construction, they do not. But if you are a general contractor, from the 6 days from your last day of furnishing, I'm not talking about warranty work, I'm talking about work on the project, you can file a mechanics lien. If you're a subcontractor and the general hasn't been paid, you have to give 30 days notice to the owner and the general in writing before you can file a lien. So it's really 5 months for a subcontractor to from the date of furnishing to file their mechanics lien. It's 6 overall, but you got to build in the 30-day cushion. Subs cannot lien if the general contractor has been paid either. By the way, if you have to file a lien, you can do it on your own. You can hire a company to do it. They're generally pretty technical, and if you screw one up, there's no turning back from it. It's strictly interpreted, strictly construed. One error in the application can make the whole thing defective. Other laws you need to understand is breach of contract. It's an offer to do something, another side accepts it. There's money consideration that's changed hands to support the agreement, and then one party doesn't do something. So customer hires you, you do all the contracting right, you have your corporation, you're registered, everything is beautiful. And then you don't show up for work after, let's say, being on the job for 2 or 3 days, and you're gone for a week and nobody knows what you're doing. And the completion date was, in 3 days. You blew the deadline. You blew the completion date. You are in breach of the contract. You did not deliver as promised. The damages for that is to put the customer in the same position they would have been had you not breached, which means it's the value of the contract. But if you performed some and they've gotten some value and just not this last bit, they're not entitled to the entire contract. They're just entitled to what they paid for. Fraud means that you intentionally misled somebody, making them reasonably believe that you were going to do something. They gave you money or did something, and as a result of that, you didn't do it. It's basically theft. That's an easy way to put it that most people can understand. What you do need to understand, though, is if you mobilize to a job and you start doing the work, and then you fail in the middle of it, you run out of money, you go out of business, have a health issue, and you just don't complete, that's not fraud. That's breach of contract. You have to do something that shows an intent and an inducement to have somebody pay you for something you never intended to do. Where contractors get screwed up is, let's say there's progress payments. You have 3-month job. They're going to pay you this amount of money on the first month and the second month and the third month. And you go into the second progress payment, you submit a payment application to the customer. And at that point, you're not going to use that money for whatever you're billing them for. You're not going to come back. You're going to, there's something else that's going on in your life that's preventing you from going there. That would be fraud. Okay. Taking money is not, and failing is not always fraud, but taking it knowing that you're probably not going to perform, that is fraud. And the timing up and the circumstances can look kind of shifty if you take money from somebody and then you just don't reappear on the job. So you have to make sure you're very clear on how you document things and what you're asking for. Piercing the corporate veil we talked about earlier. Some of these things I repeat here because they're somewhat complex topics, and they're worth just hitting again now that you have some of the context from the other materials. Piercing the veil means you go after somebody individually as opposed to their corporation. So let's say you're talking about, first person that pops in my head is Tesla. Okay, Elon Musk is the owner of Tesla. If you had a contract with Tesla, you can't sue Elon Musk. You're suing Tesla. But if Tesla is committing fraud or doing something else, or they're almost bankrupt, then you can name Elon Musk in the suit and try and hold him personally liable. But you need to be right, and you have to have a good faith reason to do it. You can't just make this stuff up. There are consequences if you file a lawsuit that shouldn't be filed. So that's talking about the contracts and the general law, but I'm really interested in talking about managing your business in the context of having like this legal vehicle, this thing set up. Only written contracts, no handshakes, no text messages, no emails. Can you confirm a change in the work via email? Probably, but you're going to eventually need to get a signature. I do not recommend it. Be very careful with text messages with customers. Make sure you're going to make a profit. If you're not going to make a profit, don't do it. Don't do it. Use your instinct. If you're talking to a customer and they give you the heebie-jeebies and You think, yeah, I really need the money. I got to do this. My daughter has a dance recital. I'm having a hard time paying my bills. Or, you're buying some equipment, something like that. Man, it's not worth it. It's not worth. I've seen so many small contracting companies go out of business in the past couple of years because of one job, just one job, where they get sit for $20,000 or $30,000. They can't handle the hit. Then they get into a lawsuit, and it gets really expensive really fast. So you got to strike while the iron's hot. And look, if you do good work, you return phone calls, you can charge what's reasonable. Scope changes are killers. You have to make sure they're documented, make sure you get a change order. If the client wants something that you can perform, do that change order, document it clearly on the price, make sure you have some float in, a little extra money, some padding. Not to be dishonest, but because maybe you're doing a scope change that you really aren't familiar with, or as a material change, and there may be some downstream issues in the construction where that scope change may alter things. If you have to pour an extra, 10 yards of concrete, or something like that, that's going to involve excavation, may involve changing the permit. It may involve, erosion issues, may involve all these other things that are downstream. It's never the 10 yards of concrete. It's all the stuff around it. So you got to be really, really careful how to do it. There's estimating software out there that you can use. How helpful it would be for residential, I don't know. And the costs, from what I understand, they're fairly reasonable. Talk to some of the older contractors too. You say, hey, I'm going to be doing this job. I got to change this thing. How much should I charge for it? But set schedules and stick to them. I mean, the most successful home improvement contractors I know are like clockwork. They show up at a person's house at 7:30. Their guys are working at 7:45. They leave at 3, so they're not getting cooked in the summertime. The customer really is happy because they know it's predictable, and they think that you're really committed to the job because you're maintaining a schedule, just like the rest of us have to do, and stick to them. The worst thing is a contract that shows up now, maybe later, a couple days, sometimes at 1, sometimes at 9. It looks really haphazard. Maintain separate accounting for each job. It's job cost accounting. I mean, it's, you may have one bank account, but in QuickBooks or whatever your accountant uses, it's job A, and you keep, you have your deposit, you list money for permits, your labor, materials, fuel, food, all those other things. You keep a list of it, you can figure out whether you're profitable or not. Do not front load a job. And I mentioned this earlier, front loading means, okay, I've got this job, I'm at 90% completion, I just got awarded this other job. I'm going to take money from the deposit in the second job so I can pay for my last 10% on the last one because, I had some defective work, rework, whatever you want to call it. Well, that means that your second job is in the hole already. And the only way you can fix that is to get a third job and take money from that. You can't do that. Do not front load your job. Avoid it as much as you can. Even if that means you can take a loan or put it on a credit card or something to complete the work so you don't get killed. Don't take money from one job and put it into another. That could be fraud. Create a system. If you do not have a system that keeps in mind this one law, that customers will turn on you, it will fail. You don't build a system for success, you build it for failure. So if any of you guys are familiar with Nextdoor, Nextdoor is probably one of the most toxic social media accounts in the world. And it's a lot of people living in the same area. And if one contractor does something wrong, they put it on full blast and everybody knows about it. And the next thing you know, your reputation's trashed. They go to BBB, which is a waste of money. Don't spend money on BBB. Nobody cares about the BBB, but the customers will do it and it will tarnish you. They'll go on social media, all those other things. But when they turn on you, they turn on you fast. Sometimes it's justified. I've seen a lot of bad contractors. I've seen contractors completely rip people off. I've seen them go to jail, which is rare. So I understand it, but I'm talking to you because you want to be a good contractor, or you are a good contractor, and you want to be better and make sure that you're protected and you're doing a service by your customers. Nobody goes into business to do bad work, right? Or to rip somebody off. That isn't the intent here. But understand that in the seas that you're swimming in, There are a lot of sharks. And there are a lot of people who are unethical in what they do. And you have to stand out from them. And it doesn't take much for you to do it. Be friendly, but not friends. It's that simple. You know, you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of your family. You do right by your customer, of course. Always do the job. Be ethical, be upright, but man, don't cross the streams here. Be formal with work, expectations, and changes. Meaning, hey, we're great. Everybody's happy. Really like working with you guys as my customer. But I got to have a change order here. We got to sign this thing. It's got to be in writing. The law requires me to do it. Use the excuse, hey, my lawyer's a nightmare. And if I don't do this, he's going to yell at me. Can you help me out? And also expectations. You know, somebody may look at you doe-eyed and say, look, can we have this project done in 2 weeks because my daughter's going to have a shower here or something like that. If you're not going to hit that date, you know, you need to, you know, put it in writing. That's the goal, but we cannot promise it. And all changes, you know, hey, you gotta document them. Document. Cases are won and lost on documentation. The Attorney General's office calls you because a customer complains, and it does happen. If you have the documents ready to go with change orders, the contract, pictures of the work you did, invoices, receipts, all those things, you save them for each individual job, man, you will get out of hot water faster than you can imagine. If you don't, people keep digging. I wanted to put this in here twice. Take pictures and videos. There's no reason not to. Phones are amazing. I mean, you can film a feature-length movie on one of these cell phones. Take a lot of pictures, back them up, save them to Dropbox. Make sure you keep them where they need to be. Send them to your customers if you want to. And if you make a mistake, fix it. Look, one of your guys drops something on somebody's new hardwood floor. Fix the wood. You know, take panels out. Put new ones in, get it done early, be accountable, and be reachable. Again, change orders are absolutely crucial. This is where all contractors get into trouble. Text messages and emails help communicate, but they are not enough. When you talk here, I have a saying, you know, dance like nobody is watching, but email to somebody as if it'll be read aloud at a deposition. So there's an example from, you know, my cousin Vinny, where, you know, the two kids are picked up by the local police. They ask the one kid the question, did you shoot the clerk? And the kid says, when you talk to him, I shot the clerk. I shot the clerk. You know, so he's incredulous. You can hear it from his voice. Well, when they read the transcript in court, it's flat. It just says, I shot the clerk. I shot the clerk. That's what happens with text messages and emails. If you say to a customer, we will make it right, or you have my word, and my word is my bond, and we always take care of our customers, that will get you in a lot of trouble. Just say, you know, be very matter of fact. This is what we plan to do. This is when we can do it. This is how much it's going to cost you for me to do it. But be methodical. Create a scope of work. Include contingencies. Say that this job could be an additional 20% depending upon subsurface conditions. If we dig up things and we find that there's rock or fill or something like that, it could cost more money. And then if the customer does not want to sign a change order, they refuse to do it for whatever reason, you may want to consider saying, I'm not doing any of the work at all. And you may want to consider terminating them too. Communication solves a lot of problems for contractors. Look, if I hear this all the time, if somebody can find a contractor that returns their phone calls, shows up on time, and actually does the work as promised, they're going to tell 50 other people, and you're going to you couldn't possibly have more work. The problem then is hiring people, which is a completely different story for a completely different day. But I will tell you, this is true with big commercial jobs or residential. Communication solves a lot of problems. If their client is calling you about an issue that they have, pick up the phone. Just don't get in endless text messages with them at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night where you're arguing with each other. If that happens, you got to break off the conversation, tell them you'll talk to them on the job site on Monday. Again, be very consistent with arrival and departure times. It means a lot. clean up every day. This is one of the biggest issues. The contractor didn't clean up, it's always a mess, everything's a mess. It's a construction site, it's gonna be a mess. But like picking up cigarette butts or soda cans or things like that, clean up your own garbage, haul it off every single day. Make sure when you're talking about changes that you're talking with both, not just the decision maker, whether it's husband or wife or partners or whatever the case may be. You need both of them to agree in writing to any change. I've seen so many times where the husband wants one thing, the spouse wants something else. They don't agree on it. The contractor takes direction from who he believes is directing the flow. And the next thing you know, the other partner, who's also a signatory to the contract, says no. Now you're stuck in between, you don't know what their personal life is like. They may hate each other, you gotta have consensus from everybody. And if you don't, you're gonna run into problems. Some final thoughts. Dance like no one is watching. Email as if it will be read aloud at a deposition. Absolutely true. Your contract is your friend. This idea of, oh, back in my day, we did business over a handshake. Things aren't like the way they used to be. Nonsense. They've always been that way. The difference is the laws have changed. The internet has changed things. Your reputation isn't about a guy who goes down to the local bar and complains about you to his neighbor. Okay. Anybody with a social media account can completely trash you and you may not be able to recover from it. That contract is your friend. Change orders are your friend. Make sure you keep a separation between you and your business. Pay your taxes and your workers. There's a law in Pennsylvania called the Wage Payment Collection Law. If you don't pay your folks, they can sue you, they can get treble damages, and they get attorney fees. And there are plaintiff lawyers who will file a lawsuit against you for $1 to collect attorney fees. Taxes are where a lot of companies get screwed up, which is why you need an accountant. You got to pay sales and use tax if it's applicable every single month or quarterly, depending on what you are. You have to submit W-2s. You have to do all these administrative things that are a nightmare. But if you don't do it, you're going to get put out of business. So just a closing thought, there is a ton of work out there. Everybody knows there's a ton of work out there. It's difficult to do. It's difficult to make margins. It's difficult to get materials that are reasonably priced and consistent. It's very, very competitive out there. But if you start getting a toehold and you get a reputation for being a pristine worker who is very responsive and takes care of your business, not just the construction, you're going to find that you're going to be very successful. But if you have questions and you get stuck, make sure you talk to a lawyer. Don't try and do these things on your own. I'm happy to help to the extent that I can. If you can't, afford the rates that we charge, or if schedule doesn't allow it, I have a lot of colleagues who I trust for referral work who can handle your type of case for your smaller company. But I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has them. Please feel free to email those questions to me. And thank you all for your time today.